So I was listening to a video the other day, and this guy was talking about living in the cheapest area that you possibly could to save money. And he had picked this town in Florida. And when we looked it up, it's pretty much overrun with the largest alligators ever. But he was talking about how you could choose to live somewhere cheaper. And if you knew how to live like that and you were used to living in poverty, that you really had the ability to stack up your money. And he's so right. Depending on what your level of your standard of living is, it makes it easier or harder to figure out how to save money. Now, this behind me is one of the river bridges not far from my home. And this is God's country, as the people out here call it. But when I grew up working the land, being a farmer, that was our only objective. That was our responsibility, to take care of the farm. I never heard about money except for checks came in the mail. Mail was a really big deal. And when we would go to town, we couldn't even leave until after the mail because it was a huge event. But we didn't go to town that often. So going to town wasn't our primary objective. Living next to somewhere to buy groceries was not our objective. Living in an area where we had amenities and choices of things to entertain us was not our objective. Living and working the land was. And maybe when you have this as your backdrop, the other things don't seem as important. And I guess that's how I grew up, is this was what mattered, not the city stuff. And I still am that way. I still don't lean towards city living at all, or am enthused about being in the city, being around a ton of people, doing things that have a lot of people involved in them, a lot of events that have a lot of people. I just enjoy being outside and soaking up this atmosphere. But as he talked about how you could save money, he talked about how people that are poor have learned how to get by on very little, but they've learned how to still save and make things work. And I think that's the advantage that I have had growing up. I think we were poor. No one really talked about it. We were careful with our money. We pinched pennies, I'm sure, because Mom was very careful about anything she spent. And we were huge savers. We were able to save money. Even in my dad's retirement, I remember he only got $500 and some per month in Social Security. And he still had several CDs. And back then the interest was a little more, so he'd get like $30 a month for like 4 CDs each, so like an extra $120 a month that went with his $500 in Social Security, and he lived off that interest and that Social Security, and he still was able to save money. So living above your means most definitely makes it hard, because I think when your standards go up, it's harder to bring them back down. If you get used to the fancy house, the big house, the nice neighborhood, the nice schools, the fancy cars, you know, if you get used to that type of lifestyle, then if you have to go back to driving a dented car, it's really hard. And so for those of us that have driven dented cars and know that it's not a big deal to drive a dented car, it's easier for us to save money because we're not looking to always aspire to that next level. And when you go to those next levels, it's kind of an insult to come back down, and it's harder for people to come back down to a different level. A lot of people would not want to live here. Yes, they might want to visit and say this is beautiful, but day in and day out they would get bored and they would say, I don't want to live here. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be out there around nobody and nothing. I want to be able to get things when I want it. I want to be able to get, you know, a coffee out or fast food if I want it. And it's not out here. We're 40 miles from the nearest city. And so you're not going to run into town for every little thing. You're going to make lists, and you're going to make, you know, a pantry storage. You're going to make sure you have what you need when you need it: medicine, band-aids, whatever you need, tools, supplies. They recently redid these bridges. There were always 3 river bridges here when I was growing up. Now there's 2, and they were a 1-car bridge with stone sides, and now they're a 2-car bridge. And we sent pictures of this to my son, who moved to Baltimore, and he goes, well, that's kind of excessive, isn't it, making a 2-car bridge? Because you might see a car or 2 if you sit down here for hours, but you're not going to see 2 at the same time going opposite directions. But so it's kind of sad because that history is gone. It's always been that way. My older brother learned to drive on those 1-car bridges. In fact, he even slid on the ice at one time and hit one of the stone guard rails. So it's kind of sad that some of this history is being modernized. And for me to say this is modernized, you're probably thinking that's crazy. But out here, what's normal and what's normal in a more modern environment, a more city environment, are 2 different things. So I wanted to share some of that with you today so you can see where I come from. So living out here probably gives you a lot more opportunities to save, for the fact that we're not going to town all the time. We're not going to the store very often. We're making lists, we're stocking things, going to do something every day away from here is not our objective. I remember when I first moved out on my own, and I moved in the same area with my kids. I remember going to the bank on Fridays or Saturday mornings and getting money for the weekend in case we needed it. I remember, you know, doing laundry all day Saturday and Sunday with 6 kids, and trying to get all my chores done in the little bit of time that I had allowed. And now that I know what I know, I look back and I think, I spent so much extra money that would have helped me back then. You know, I didn't understand peak hours in doing laundry. I didn't understand that if I stocked up, I didn't need to have all that extra cash on the weekend, because I didn't need to go somewhere for things I forgot, or things that I needed, or things that I decided I needed at the last minute because I hadn't prepared and I hadn't planned ahead. I made it harder on myself by not being able to be more organized. And, you know, when you have 6 kids and you're going in all those different directions, I'm probably being too hard on myself. I'm sure that it would have been hard for me to keep all of that organized and still work full time. But knowing what I know now, I could have made it so much easier on myself to have known the things that I know now and do some of the things that I do now, that I've added to my frugal living over the years. Most every town out here still has an elevator standing, even if it's a ghost town. Because when I grew up, that's where your money came from, was from the elevators after you would dump the wheat. So I guess I just wanted this to be an encouraging video to you, to let you know that if you are living in poverty, if you are living poor, you kind of have an advantage. I know it doesn't feel like you do, but you already know ways to cut corners and to live cheaper, where some people living above their means, they have no idea, and it's tougher for them to come down. Many people that are making $100,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. And for those of us that don't make that much, that just seems crazy. Like, why in the world would they still be living paycheck to paycheck? But it's because they're still living above their means, or they have overextended themselves because of the amount of money that they make. And so I want you to realize that moving into the country, or moving into a cheaper area, like a town that is not as expensive to live in, that is a great way to be able to save and to stack up money. Many people will tell me, oh my gosh, but you have the drive. That's not worth it. That costs too much. Well, it does cost time. But in gas, if you have a car that's economical, I spend way, way less on gas and housing than I would living in the city. It more than pays for itself to live in a cheaper area and then drive back and forth. My insurance is low, my property taxes are low, my housing costs are low, and my gas is low. So there are options to be able to live in a less populated area or a cheaper area and be able to stack up some cash so that you can save some money if that's really what you need to do. And you don't necessarily have to live in alligator land. So I hope this has been inspiring to you. Thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate the time that you spend with me, every single one of you. I appreciate all of your comments. I feel like I know you personally, and I really look forward to sharing experiences with you. So I hope to see you soon.